Welcome to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. Today, Ross Clark from CIBC Wood Gundy will look at the U.S. dollar and its effect on markets and metals. Doug Casey, founder of Casey Research, talks to us from Las Vegas, where he's attending Freedom Fest. We'll ask him if he has really found any freedom there, his feelings about government in general, whether drugs should be legal or not, and what country has the best business climate. Apparently, democracy isn't always the best for freedom of prosperity. Plus, at the end of the show, we'll have company showcase updates from Lotus Ventures' Dale McClanaghan and Rainy Mountain's Doug Mason and Bob Middleton. We'll talk to Ross Clark right after this.
I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead-zinc-silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic engineer gold mine in the Atlan District of Northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Welcome to This Week in Money, the source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Clark. He's an investment advisor at CIBC Wood Gundy in Vancouver. Welcome back to This Week in Money, Ross.
Good to be with you, Jim.
A very interesting week. We had two of the major indexes in the U.S. set record highs, but are they as high as they appear?
Well, they've been putting in record high days and back-to-back days. Things, I think the S&P or the NASDAQ had 10 days in a row. And then on Friday finally gave it back, so not pushing it into the record book. But the reality of this is that we're not watching strength in the U.S. market as much as we are looking at weakness in the U.S. dollar. Since the first of the year, the U.S. dollar has been under pressure. And if you are Canadian, you clearly recognize what's happening here, that even if your value of your U.S. assets are going up in U.S. dollars and you price them back in Canadian, they're not looking good. If you're a European looking at them, it's even a greater differential there. So, we sent out a report a week ago pointing out exactly what happens when you get divergences, when you get strength in the domestic market. In this case, it would be the Americans looking at the S&P or the Dow, that is not matching or offsetting the weakness in your currency. That's usually just a precursor to a decent correction, anywhere from 4.5% to 10% correction in the marketplace. So we've got to be wary of that. And, the other market that people look at to go up when the currency is dropping is the gold market and the silver market. And in reality, for all that they had a good week this week, they're only matching about half of what they should be doing on the upside related to currency. So it wouldn't be at all surprised to see these maybe peaking out midweek in this coming week.
Should people be looking at gold bullion or gold stocks?
I think you look at the bullion. The stocks at this point have been underperforming coming off this bottom, and I think that there's still some softness there. You really want to see a good divergence at a bottom, with the stocks really leading off the bottom, and we're not seeing that right now. So I think patience, even though we're in a strong seasonal period coming up here, there isn't that spark right now in that market to say it's time to do anything. Commitment of traders numbers a week ago were exceptionally conservative or constructive, and we did see a rise in the price of the metals, and a marginal one in the miners. And as of this Friday, the numbers look very almost flat as far as the COTs are concerned. So there hasn't been any big move here to help push prices higher. But next Friday or next week when we're talking, we'll take a look and see what they're like. But for now, wouldn't be at all surprised to see a bit of a rest.
What about other metals, the basic ones that aren't precious?
Yes, in terms of other metals, the base metals have been doing reasonably well. You've got copper, which had been down around $2.45 a pound, back up now to $2.75, approaching the highs of the year that we had back in February. But once again, price this back in terms of what's going on with currency, and you can see that the mining stocks have as base metal miners has been underperforming as well. at this point, I think you want to be looking pretty closely at how the mining stocks themselves are doing. If you look at some big ones like Freeport, 17 down to 11 has only recovered to 13. If you look at a Hudbay Mining here in Canada, Hudbay's gone from 12 to 6, only recovered back to 8.25. So the miners underperforming the bullion, and for that reason, it makes us a little bit on the cautious side.
Ross, thank you so much for chatting with us.
I'll be with you next week, Jim.
My guest has been Ross Clark, investment advisor at CIBC Wood Gundy, Vancouver. Coming up, Doug Casey, next on This Week in Money.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
GEM International is a new diamond explorer in the richest diamond producing country in Africa, located next to the 4th largest producing diamond mine in the world. International spotlight is on an 1109 carat diamond recently discovered in Africa by a fellow Canadian junior with a proven operator and finance team. GEM International trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol GI. Visit us at gemdiamondmining.com.
This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
My guest is Doug Casey. He's the founder and chairman of Casey Research. You can find them online at caseyresearch.com. He's speaking to us from Las Vegas. Doug, welcome back to This Week in Money.
Thanks, Jim. A pleasure, of course.
Doug, what's happening in Las Vegas right now that would draw somebody like you?
Well, I like to play poker, of course, but I haven't had a chance to do much of that. I've been going to something called Freedom Fest, which has been going on for 10 years. And this year, there's one of your fellow Canadians, William Shatner, who is the kind of keynote speaker. I guess Bill Shatner is something of a libertarian himself. I'll find out. I'll listen to his speech tonight.
Well, he's always an interesting fellow and always has something interesting to say.
Yeah, he's got a particular style. He's charming, and I'm pleased to see that he may be a libertarian.
And Doug, of course, you have the Sprott Natural Resources Symposium in Vancouver, July 25th to the 28th at the Hotel Vancouver. Can you tell us anything about that?
Well, I'll be back in Vancouver, and Vancouver's one of my favorite places in the world, actually. I like it a lot more than Las Vegas. So I'll be talking about investments, mining stocks, things of that nature. It's at the Hotel Vancouver if anybody wants to sign up and register.
And, of course, that's a very nice place. It's been renovated. Impressive. It's a historic structure. A lot of historic things have happened there. Maybe you guys will be making some history.
Well, we'll see. I mean, there's nothing like a bull market in resource stocks to pad your bank account. And when you have a bear market, there's nothing like a bear market in resource stocks to melt your bank account down.
Looking at the Freedom Fest in Vegas, are people becoming any freer?
No, they're not. All over the world, governments are going in the wrong direction. They're becoming more repressive. There's more regulations, more taxes, because most of the governments in the world are bankrupt. So the trend is very bad everywhere in the world. In fact, the country where I've been living in most for the last 10 years, Argentina, which has been a disaster from every point of view for many, many, many years, decades even, is about the only place in the world that the trend has turned around and gotten better. So that's the answer, as far as I'm concerned.
Is there any particular focus at this year's Freedom Fest?
I'm a little bit disappointed at this year's Freedom Fest because there's a large number of Republicans and neocons and people of that type that sometimes talk the talk of liberty, but don't walk the walk. So everything else being equal, as you might have guessed so far, I prefer to hang out with people that have libertarian values, which means that they believe in both social freedom and economic freedom.
Well, we have the NAFTA talks coming up. What kind of negotiation should be going on, and should there even be tariffs and duties at the borders?
No, there shouldn't be any tariffs or duties. I mean, it's ridiculous. Tariffs and duties just benefit certain politically favored industries. They hurt the society as a whole. They hurt the average man. So, no, there shouldn't be any of this kind of nonsense. I believe in free minds and free markets.
Well, the tariffs on Canadian softwood, for example, I've heard, are going to cost about 10,000 American jobs because it'll make it more expensive to build a house.
Well, of course, it'll probably cost more than that. And of course, it'll put a lot of Canadians out of work. It'll slow down trade generally. It's incredibly stupid. But almost everything the governments do everywhere is counterproductive and stupid. I'm just shocked and disgusted that the average guy supports his government reflexively.
Sean Spicer has resigned as press secretary for President Trump. Is that a sign of discord in the White House?
You know, I don't know, and I don't care. I mean, these people live in a little bubble of their own, and the only thing that we can hope is that they don't do too much damage. Whether it's Trump or whether Hillary got elected or whatever, no good comes of it. So Sean Spicer, who knows, who cares? They're all just replaceable cogs in the wheel.
To the markets, could the Dow continue to go higher to 30 or even 40,000 points?
Right now, it seems like we're in a stock market melt up. And the reason for this is that since the crisis started in 2007, governments all over the world, not just the U.S., but Europe, Japan, Canada, China, everywhere, have been creating trillions of new currency units. And that money is creating bubbles, especially in the bond market, but stock markets, real estate markets, everywhere. So sure, the market could go higher. It's grossly overpriced now, but that doesn't mean it can't get twice as overpriced.
Do gold and silver look poised to move higher?
Yes, I think so, because they're the only financial assets that are not simultaneously somebody else's liability. So there will eventually be a bubble in gold and silver, too. I think that they're two of the only cheap things out there. So if you have new capital, that's where you put them. Put the money to be safe and secure, that is. Absolutely.
If you had a choice between bullion or gold mining stock, which one would you pick, or is there any difference?
Well, they're two totally different investments. You buy the bullion or the coins, and I prefer the coins over bullion. You buy that for safety, for security, for prudence, because it's an asset that's in your own hands, not dependent on anything else. You buy the stocks, and your timing has to be good for this, of course, because they're a leverage way of playing the metals. So two different investments. Stocks much more risky, but much more upside potential if you pick the right stock at the right time.
When interest rates move higher off a long-term bottom, are they more likely to move slowly or quickly?
Well, the thing about interest rate cycles is that they tend to be very long. I mean, interest rates, going back in history a little bit, bottomed in the early 50s, and they went up and up gradually until they reached 16, 17, 20% even back in the early 80s. And since the early 80s, they've been going down, down, down. I think they've reached the bottom. Now the question is, what's going to happen next? Well, they're going up. Will it take 30 years to reach another peak? I don't think so. I think this is going to happen much more dramatically, much more quickly. One thing I do know is I don't want to own bonds now because interest rates are so low.
When they boost interest rates, of course, in Canada, a 0.25% increase saw the Canadian dollar rise quite rapidly. Is there any danger that your currency might become too overvalued if you boost interest rates too quickly?
Well, look, everybody should want a strong currency because you can buy more. I mean, if a weak currency was good, places like Zimbabwe and Venezuela would be beacons of prosperity. So what you want is the strongest currency possible so that it's worth saving and you can build capital. I don't know if I'm not particularly bullish about the Canadian dollar right now. It's a resource-based currency, and right now commodities are low, so that augurs well for the Canadian dollar. On the other hand, you've got a lunatic in Ottawa right now, and the provincial governments have turned very left in recent years. So, I like hanging out in Canada, but I'm not sure if I want to put any more money there.
Is it scary for business when left-wing governments get elected?
Oh, yes, it is, because they believe that your money belongs to them. So I don't like either left-wing or right-wing governments, quite frankly. It's a question of just choosing your poison. But from an economic point of view, the leftists are always more dangerous. And economics is about prosperity. So left-wing governments tend to damage the prosperity of the average person more than right-wing governments. But right-wing governments tend to damage his social freedom more. So neither left-wing or right-wing are very appealing to me.
Magna Auto Parts in Ontario has just chastised the government there, saying they show no respect at all for business. They don't understand business. And if businesses there don't feel welcome, they'll pull up their plants and their plans and move elsewhere. And if they do move out, they may not come back. Is that a legitimate concern?
Absolutely correct. And Canada is a country where it's very hard to conduct a business. Anybody that runs a business in Canada or the United States, and Europe is worse than either the U.S. or Canada, is a hero, quite frankly. If I was going to start a new business today, I would want to go to the Orient to do it. Probably China is probably the freest place in the world to start a business, so-called communist China.
We'll have more with Doug Casey next on This Week in Money.
Lotus Ventures, Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario. With grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold, a drill program will commence this spring to test the numerous targets located by recent groundwork. For more information, visit our website, rmroyalty.com.
This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
Welcome back to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. We're speaking with Doug Casey, founder of Casey Research, which you can find online at caseyresearch.com. If you were taking a look, as you said, of starting a new business or improving your business, you said China would be a good place to start. Why do you feel a communist government would be so friendly for business?
Well, it's not a communist government, quite frankly. The one thing that the Chinese government will not let you do is get involved in politics or say things that run counter to their political interests. But when it comes to starting a factory or doing business, they're much easier to get along with than anything in the West.
As more and more governments are legalizing marijuana, Canada supposedly will make it legal July 1st. Are you bullish on marijuana stocks?
I am, actually. The marijuana business has lots of medical applications, which unfortunately have been suppressed these many years. I think this is a big deal. And I personally am not into indulging in either drugs or alcohol. I mean, it's fine. I think they should be totally and completely legal in all regards. But I think that the recreational pot area is going to get quite big too. So yeah, I think it's a place to be from an investment point of view, to get as big or bigger than the liquor industry, quite frankly.
Is it tobacco and liquor who have been fighting making marijuana legal?
Look, it's disgusting the way these people in various industries try to use the state to hurt their competition. And the only persons that really get hurt are the public at large, whose choices are limited. So it's quite disgusting, actually.
Well, the people I've talked to in Washington State, in Colorado, in California, where it's legal, they haven't reported any riots in the streets. They don't see any increase in crime. If anything, they say society seems to be a little more mellow, a little more gentler.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's been no great increase in drug use or people wandering around stoned in Colorado. I live in Colorado during the summer in Aspen, and no change whatsoever that I can detect since these pot dispensaries have opened up. And the rest of the year, I spend a lot of time in Argentina and Uruguay. Uruguay, it's completely legal. No changes whatsoever since that's happened, except the amount of crime supposed has gone down because people can't be arrested for having a simple plant on them now the way they could. No, so legalize everything, quite frankly.
Control it, make sure it's of high quality, and people aren't dying from overdoses.
No, I wouldn't say control it at all. I mean, let the market do that. Give people more personal responsibility. They'll sort it out. It's just like when you buy a bottle of wine at a liquor store. You might choose a cheap wine. You might choose an expensive wine. It's your choice.
What sectors are you investing in right now?
Well, I think it's hard to make any investments today because real estate is overpriced everywhere in the world, especially, I've got to say, in Vancouver and Toronto. It's a bubble in those two cities. It's a bubble in many nice cities around the world. So forget about real estate. Forget about the bond market. I mean, it's an accident waiting to happen. Stock market's overpriced. Not much you can do. We're in the twilight zone investment-wise. And I think that the great economic hurricane that started in 2007, and we went through the leading edge in 2008 and 2009, since then, we've been in the eye of the storm, which has been papered over by these trillions of currency units the governments have created. Now, as we speak, we're going into the trailing edge of the storm, and it's going to be very, very scary. Much different, much worse, and much longer lasting than what you saw in 2008 and 2009. So, hold on to your hat, investment-wise.
All these central banks engaged in quantitative easing, was that a good idea or just a path to disaster?
A very stupid idea. I mean, central banks should not exist as institutions. They're simply engines of inflation. They shouldn't be treated with any respect. The simple fact that people call money printing, it's now been renamed quantitative easing. It shows how shallow the thought is on this whole area.
I know the idea behind the central banks created by the bankers themselves was to prevent recessions. How many recessions and depressions have we had since they started central banks?
Well, actually, the recessions and depressions that we've had since central banks became popular about 100 years ago, they've all been caused by central banks, not cured by them. All central banks wind up doing is destroying the currency and making the system more unstable. So it's just the opposite of the propaganda that most people have been led to believe.
Do you see any sectors that are bottoming and in a bottoming phase?
Well, commodities have been going down since their last peak in 2011. Agricultural commodities, industrial commodities, all kinds of commodities have been going down now for the last 6 years. And I think they're bottoming at this point. So although the long-term trend, and I mean this is a trend that's been going on for 10,000 years, quite frankly, of commodities has been to go down for lots of good reasons, technology and so forth. But cyclically, I think commodities are at a bottom, and I am bullish on commodities now.
Cryptocurrencies seem to be all the rage right now. Are they the modern-day version of tulips?
Eventually they will be, but cryptocurrencies are just the first application of what's known as blockchain technology, which is going to transform banking, transform record keeping, transform all kinds of things. And these cryptocurrencies are quite interesting with what they allow you to do. So I think that there could be a bubble in them. There's a bubble developing in cryptocurrencies, but it's not early days anymore. People that got in a few years ago have gotten 100 to 1, even 1,000 to 1 on the money that they put into them. So I'm afraid that by the time the public gets involved in them, most people are going to lose money. It's just like mining stocks. The public only gets involved in them after they've already gone up 10 or 20 or 30 times. That's when you should be selling them, not buying them. That said, I think that these cryptocurrencies have further to go on the upside.
Is it always a sign of semi-disaster when all of a sudden something does become popular and trendy and people at cocktail parties say to one another, hey, I just got this hot stock, you should get in on it too?
You're absolutely right. That is usually the bell ringing at the top of the market. So it's very hard to do, but you want to get into things that are essentially sound and are unpopular, because if they're unpopular, they're cheap, and that's when you want to buy them.
Is Freedom Fest a step towards healing the left-right divide in the United States?
No, I think the U.S. is on the ragged edge of a civil war, quite frankly. I mean, these people that live in the so-called red counties and the ones that live in the so-called blue counties, they actually hate each other. This is a cultural war. It's not just a polite political disagreement. I think it's very serious. And as the economy turns down, I think it could get really ugly. So, in the years to come, as you turn on the news, you can turn off the audio and just put on the Rolling Stones' Street Fighting Man and listen to that instead of some talking head yapping as you see people fighting in the streets.
Why is there a different attitude? I pretty well call it the difference in the U.S., I guess, between the east and west areas that are urbanized and industrialized versus the central interior of the country and the south.
Yeah, it's a cultural thing. I mean, you've got people that, you know, in parts of the country actually produce things with their hands, make food, create things. And then you've got the people in the cities that just shuffle paper and collect welfare in many cases. So it's a cultural thing that is a problem in the U.S. right now. And I don't know where it's going to end. I think it's going to end badly. But I want to watch it on my widescreen from my estancia in Argentina, which is the one country in the world, believe it or not, which is actually moving in the right direction. Although who knows, the next election that could change too. I'd rather watch this stuff on my widescreen than I would out my front window.
There's a new series coming up that pretends the South won the Civil War.
Oh.
Is that the kind of scenario you could see actually happening in reality?
Well, you know, countries have political revolutions and secession movements and civil wars. I mean, this has been going on forever. And it could happen again in the United States. Of course, on the other hand, you know, you got 25% of Americans just sedated by things like Prozac and Valium, and the rest of them are too fat to get out of their couches and riot. So I don't know what is going to happen, but I think it's going to be ugly and it's going to be scary.
Your thoughts on President Trump's first 6 months in office?
I'm glad that Trump was elected because he's not part of the deep state. At least he has a business background, which makes him very unusual. So, I don't support Trump because he doesn't, but I support a lot of the things that he's doing, and I'm just really glad that Hillary didn't get in office because, you know, she's equivalent to, Cristina Kirchner in Argentina or Eva Perón in Argentina. A horrible person, dangerous person, stupid ideas, very destructive. So Trump isn't great, but much better than the alternative.
Is Trump more libertarian than Republican?
Trump doesn't have any philosophical core. I mean, I don't think he thinks about these things. One of the problems with him is he's basically a narcissist. So he does whatever seems like a good idea at the time, just in his own head, without any philosophical underpinning or thought. So, I don't know. Politics is such a problem. I don't even like to think about it.
If Trump does manage to get his tax reform in to stimulate the U.S. economy, how could it affect other countries?
It would be wonderful because you need, you know, the ideal level of taxes is zero, which is basically the level that we had during the 19th century all over the world. Taxes were almost non-existent in the 19th century, and that century had the greatest amount of progress of any century in human history, actually. Even more than the good things that happened in the 20th century. And we didn't have the kind of wars and disasters that we had. So the best amount of taxes is the least amount of taxes. And I certainly hope that they can get it done. But the U.S. government is bankrupt at this point. If they don't get the money one way through taxes, they're going to get it to either printing money or borrowing money. It's going to come out of the hide of the average person in one way or another. So I don't see any way out at this point. They're not going to cut spending, which is the only thing that really solves the problem. I mean, people seem to love government spending. It's going to wind up in a complete smoking disaster, and soon, at this point. But, no, I don't think we're going to see any tax cuts. It'd be great. I don't think we will see it.
Would the ideal situation be a cut in income tax for everybody and then have a consumption tax like Canada does, a GST?
Well, look, I don't believe in taxes in principle. I don't believe in the state in principle. But if you must have taxes, and I'm not convinced you must have them, it's better to have a consumption tax than, in effect, a production tax. You want to encourage production and, relative to that, discourage consumption. That's how you get wealthier, by producing more than you consume. So to answer your question, yeah. if you've got to have taxes, it would be better to get rid of the income tax and have a consumption tax only.
We'll have more with Doug Casey next on This Week in Money.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
I'm Larry Ray, President and CEO of American Manganese, Inc., listed on the TSX Venture, ticker symbol AMY, A-M-Y, with proprietary patents in the U.S., China, and South Africa. Our focus is on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. China recently legislated the responsibility for recycling onto their electric vehicle manufacturers and importers. For more information, please visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
Welcome back to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. We're speaking with Doug Casey, who happens to be attending Freedom Fest in Las Vegas, where you haven't seen much freedom in effect, have you?
No. Freedom is an increasingly limited quantity entity everywhere in the world today.
Globalism versus nationalism. Your thoughts on that?
Look, I don't believe in nationalism, which is really very stupid. My country is the best country in the world because that's where I was born. That makes no sense. And you have to define globalism, but it seems to be something of supranational governments as opposed to national governments. So forget about globalism and nationalism. I believe in individualism and libertarianism.
Well, they do put limits on borders and so on. Do you think that's also limiting human potential?
Yes, it is. I don't believe in national borders. On the other hand, you've got a real problem with what's going on in places, well, all over the world with migration. I mean, in the decades to come, you could find 100 million Africans migrating to Europe, and 100 million more behind them. All that's going to accomplish is destroying Western civilization and European culture. So, yes, I think people anywhere in the world should be able to go anywhere else in the world, but it's all about property rights. And you're not going to find migrants flowing into places if there are no welfare benefits to draw them and support them, and if all property is privately owned. So if they're going to go someplace, they have to pay the rent or the hotel fees. That's the solution to the problem. But of course, these governments are doing just the opposite. They're paying for people from primitive countries to, in effect, invade advanced cultures. So London is turning into Karachi West, and Paris is turning into Kinshasa North, and the residents of these countries are having to pay for it. And of course, it's happening in Canada and the U.S. too.
What's your solution to the mass migration?
Private property. In other words, there should be zero welfare benefits to attract people, because you'll recall in the 19th century, when immigrants came to the U.S. and Canada, they had to pay their own way. And once they arrived, they had to support themselves. That's fine. And all property, privately owned, so that people can't just camp out in the streets the way they're doing in Paris right now. That's the solution to the problem. I don't care if people come from third world countries to live, but I don't want to support them or anybody else in the process.
If you were Trump's top advisor, what would you tell him to do?
I think the situation is almost beyond redemption at this point. The deep state viscerally hates Trump. Academics, the media, Hollywood, top corporation people, the people that run all these Praetorian agencies in and around Washington. There's really almost nothing you can do at this point. What would I tell them to do? Do the best you can to fire as many government employees as you can, cut taxes where you can. More important, cut spending radically wherever you can. Don't spend all this money on the military. I mean, I'd hate to see him start World War III, which he might do, whether it's with the Koreans or with the Russians in Syria. So cut military spending, cut spending of all types radically. That's what I tell him to do, but it's pretty impossible at this point.
Are Hillary and company too big to prosecute?
Oh, they should be prosecuted. Absolutely. It's amazing. If you have enough power in the U.S., nobody will prosecute you. You're too big to prosecute, just like corporations get to a certain size and they're said to be too big to fail, which is also ridiculous. No, I'd love to see Hillary and all these people go to jail, and the strange deaths that seem to occur around Bill Clinton investigated properly too. But the problem is in the United States right now. It's like a cop can shoot almost anybody, and he gets a couple of weeks of administrative leave paid, if you would, and goes right back to work. The system has become very corrupt.
Is the so-called fake news media likely to make themselves obsolete as the internet continues to grow with different points of view being made available to the public?
That is one of the bright things that's happening in the world, one of the good things that's happening in the world. The corporate media that you have on broadcast TV is on the slippery slope, and you can go on your computer on the internet and get news from 1,000 different sources now. So it's going to increase responsibility on the part of the average person who will have to choose, give them a wider variety of thoughts to contemplate. Yeah, this is one of the good things that are going on in the world. The good things that are going on in the world are basically in the areas of technology, and this is one of them.
You used to live in Vancouver, but BC now has a new NDP Green Coalition government, Canada, a Liberal government under Justin Trudeau. What are your thoughts for BC and Canada going forward?
I pity the average Canadian, but the average Canadian has nobody to blame but himself for allowing these people to get into office. So what are you going to do?
What's your opinion about those kind of governments, and what could Canadians face with them?
They're disasters. They're collectivist governments. They're going to increase the amount of state control in your lives. They're going to raise your taxes. They're going to increase regulations. They're going to reduce your standard of living. So the only reason people vote for them is, I guess, they expect something for nothing. So eventually they'll be punished for that stupid view.
China is now opening a military base in Africa. What does this mean for geopolitics going forward?
Well, what's actually happening is you're going to find scores of millions, maybe even hundreds of millions of Chinese migrating to Africa in the future. At the same time, you're going to see scores of millions of Africans migrating to Europe. It might wind up as a tripartite race war. But it's going to be a big deal, because I go to Africa reasonably often, and the presence of the Chinese is very obvious, and it's becoming overwhelming in some of these countries.
Is there any reason to be bullish on the European Union?
No reason at all. The European Union is going to cease to exist. It was a bad idea from the start. I mean, it started out as a way to facilitate travel and to reduce customs duties. Wonderful idea in both cases. But it's nothing but a source now of more taxes and regulations. So the whole idea of what was the European Union has been turned on its head. It's a disaster, and it's going to fall apart. And it's a good thing that it falls apart.
Will the debt slavery of the people to the banks and the governments to the central banks ever end?
No. No, I mean, I'm in a way, I'm optimistic that, things will get better as time goes on because there'll be more capital and more science, more technology, more leisure. Hopefully people have a time to think and contemplate, and the world's less violent than it's been in the past. So I'm very optimistic for the long term, but I'm not too optimistic for the short term.
Do stupid people feel comfortable associating with other stupid people, and what effect does this have on society?
Yeah. Well, the problem is that by definition, the average IQ is 100. But also by definition, half the people are less than average. And if the average person with an IQ of 100 isn't very smart, and half the people are less than average, it's kind of scary.
I know I've always felt that way myself. The First Amendment is freedom of speech. How can hate speech coexist with the First Amendment?
I'm all for hate speech. I mean, hate speech is fine because let people say what they want. Then you can see who you're dealing with. I mean, first of all, everybody has a right to express themselves, and some of it may be unsavory, or problematical. Okay, I believe in being polite to people, but I don't care if people use hate speech. It's a way that you find out who that person is by the way he talks. And if it's impossible for him to say what's on his mind, then you don't know who you're dealing with. So, no, it's ridiculous. You can't have this whole concept of hate speech is itself stupid and disgusting. People should be able to say what they want. And if you don't like it, don't listen or go elsewhere or say something back to them. No, the government shouldn't be involved in controlling speech on any basis at all.
Which countries are the best and least governed in the world?
Well, none of them are very good at this point, frankly. Freedom is on the run all over the world. The best countries are the ones where the government leaves you alone, from my point of view. And sometimes that's third world countries because they're so incompetent that they're unable to make your life miserable, frankly. So I don't know. Listen, I'm kind of international myself. I travel around the world, which is a lot of people aren't in a position to do that. So if things go bad in one place, I'll leave and go someplace else. So that's how I solve this problem.
What's your favorite conspiracy theory?
Well, listen, I don't believe in conspiracy theories to start with. I mean, there are a lot of strange things that have happened in the world, like what happened to Building 7 on 9/11? Why did it come down? It wasn't because of office fires. It was clearly a controlled demolition. Who did it? I don't know. Why they do it? I'm not sure. But it was very strange. But there's all kinds of strange things that go on in the world that the popular media and the government give you nonsensical answers for, and everybody just believes it because it doesn't affect them personally.
So far, do you have any takeaways from Freedom Fest?
Look, Freedom Fest is a nice idea. Supposedly, freedom-loving people get together and can schmooze and so forth. But, yeah, even Freedom Fest, it seems like it's been taken over by Republicans and neocons and people like that. So, I hope they clean up their act by this time next year.
Doug, do you have a new novel in the works?
Well, that's another bright side thing. I've got a septet of novels, a series that reform the unjustly besmirched reputations of politically incorrect occupations. And Speculator was released last year, which is about a gold mining fraud and a bush war in Africa. And our hero from that, 7 years later, has now gotten into the drug business, and he's a drug lord. As you know, I'm pro the legalization of all drugs, so this talks about, it's out now. It's about the legal and illegal drug business and what happens and how it works. So people can go on Amazon and pick it up, or they can go to High Ground Books and pick it up from that website. But it's a great novel, actually. And Speculator was too, so don't fall behind. Read those now, because his next year, Assassin, is coming out when our hero, Charles Knight, becomes an assassin. And then it gets more radical from there.
Right now, people are worried about their jobs being taken away by robots. Is that a legitimate concern? And what would happen to those displaced people?
Well, it's not a concern. I mean, this is what the Industrial Revolution was all about. People were whining about factories taking away their jobs, but it's a period of change. It's wonderful. It'll create much more wealth in the world. And if your job can be done by a robot, you shouldn't be doing that job. I mean, robots should work. People should think. So it's a complete non-problem. I mean, it's amazing to me the hysteria in the world when something good is happening, reducing the amount of labor and so forth. If you're doing a robot job, and you can't find something better to do, then you're a pitiful excuse for a human, frankly.
Governments, of course, rely on income tax to run things. If robots replace income tax producing people, would they start taxing robots?
Oh, they'll probably do that, sure, of course. Governments are in the business not of producing anything, but their prime directive is to survive and to become bigger and more powerful. So sure, they'll try to tax robots.
Is the future industry repairing robots?
Robots will be able to repair themselves. Listen, we're going to be living in a science fiction world with a little bit of luck in the future. I mean, the future is not only going to be good in the long term, it's going to be better than you can even imagine. So I'm very optimistic for the long-term future.
Doug, how can people find out more about KC Research?
Go to kcresearch.com.
Doug, thank you so much for being on This Week in Money.
Well, thanks, Jim. It was a pleasant conversation, and perhaps we annoyed a few people or gratified a few others. I don't know. I'd like to know what the feedback is from our conversation.
Thanks again, Doug.
Okay, Jim. Bye.
We've been speaking with Doug Casey, founder and chairman of KCResearch.com. He was speaking to us from Las Vegas. And that wraps up our show for this week. We'd like to thank our guests, Doug Casey and Ross Clark, and thank you for listening. Coming up at the end of our show, company showcase updates with Rainy Mountain's Doug Mason and Bob Middleton and Lotus Ventures CEO Dale McClanaghan. If you have any questions for the show or our guests, you can email us at info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. We'll be back next week with more This Week in Money.
Comments made on This Week in Money are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com. This Week in Money is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated. Executive producer is Tom Allen. Welcome to Company Showcase, an advertising feature on HoweStreet.com.
I'm Jim Goddard. We're speaking with Rainy Mountain Royalty CEO and President Doug Mason and the Vice President of Exploration, Bob Middleton. Doug, what do you have to tell us today?
Well, hi, Jim. Yes, we've just recently completed a work program on our Brunswick property in Ontario. We're very excited about the chemistry and mineralization we've discovered to date. We conducted a rights offering for the company on our last interview about 4 or 5 months ago. raised about $1.5 million to enable us to go and do some early exploration work on a property. Normally, Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp is a project generating company. We prepare properties primarily in Ontario region to get them drill ready for joint venture partners. And we currently have a number of joint venture partner properties and 100% owned properties looking for partners that we have a substantial interest in, some of them quite advanced in terms of exploration. So that's normally our MO, but on this particular latest acquisition, the Brunswick property in Ontario, we got so excited about the amount of mineralization on the claim block that we decided to do a good program ourselves before joint venturing it out. And to that end, Mr. Bob Middleton, who's our QP and VP Exploration, and one of the foremost geophysicists in Canada, I might add, also has the individual that discovered the Bell Creek mine back in the 70s. He sees a lot of the same kind of mineralization that led him to the discovery of that mine. So I'll let Mr. Middleton give you a little bit more technical information on what we've discovered so far on the preliminary program on the Brunswick property. So over to you, Mr. Bob Middleton.
Yes, we've just done a news release, and we're explaining the fact that there was quite a delay in receiving the assays from the labs because there's a huge voluminous volume coming in from Quebec to swamp all the labs. Now we have all the assays in hand. We were able to announce that we've made a new discovery on surface in a pyrite volcanic tuff horizon of 6.6 grams. That's on an IP anomaly, induced polarization geophysical anomaly that's 900 meters long. And we actually have never drilled a hole in this or have done any sampling on it. So we intend to proceed with a follow-up program to do trenching and sampling of that zone, then of course drilling afterwards. But this particular zone is offset onto the eastern part of the property. There's two grids. There's an east grid and a west grid. And both sides have now been covered with induced polarization surveys, which detects the pyrite that's associated with the gold mineralization. We've drilled 6 holes on the west grid, and in those holes we've seen low gold values. However, every one of the horizons, the 4 zones that we tested, had very anomalous arsenic anomalies, which are often associated with gold deposits, both in Timmins and Red Lake and Yellowknife, etc., etc. And in addition, we have antimony, which is also associated with the Hemlo deposit, as showing up in our drill cores. So we know we're very close to a gold deposit on the west grid. On the east grid, we drilled our very first holes. By the way, this is a 6-mile-long property, and there was never a drill hole in this whole township. So we're the first ones to actually work here. In the past, there was no access to this area, and we now have the lumber road access, so we can drive to these sites. So on the east side, we have drilled a hole that had both the arsenic and anomalous gold numbers, which reminded me very much of one of my holes I drilled in 1979 that discovered the Bell Creek mine. It's, in fact, the hole that led us to the actual discovery. So we intend to do step-out drill holes to that hole number 4 on the east grid to follow up on the intersection that we've got. We've also discovered another new shear zone that looks promising that we're going to drill and do some trenching on, and also look for the offset of this 6.5 gram gold discovery we made on the west grid, this fault offset, and reappears on the east grid. So there's a lot going on, and I'm flying back from Vancouver tomorrow to go back to the property, which is 140 kilometers south of Timmins, which is the biggest gold camp in actually Canada. So we're going to continue there. The prospector working with me is Mike Tremblay, who's the one that found the Borden deposit that was sold to Goldcorp for $555 million. And we think we have a similar setting, but it's less metamorphosis. It's more like the Bell Creek mine in Timmins that I worked on back in 1979 before the company I was with, Rosario, was taken over by Amax, which then became the mine that started Kinross. And it's more recently known as the Lakeshore Mine.
So, Bob, where exactly is all this activity taking place? I know you described it being near Timmins. Is that where it is?
Right. We're on just east of Highway 144. That's the main highway that links Timmins to Sudbury. So we're halfway between Timmins and Sudbury. We're on a narrow piece of greenstone belt that it starts off in Kirkland Lake and comes southwest through Matachewan, where Orico has a mine. And of course, Kirkland Lake is Kirkland Lake Gold, and that structure continues onward and becomes the Rideout Fault that goes through our property. And then west of us, on the west side of Highway 144, a company called IM Gold are developing a very large deposit called the Chester. And they've recently had Sumitomo of Japan come in and buy a 1/3 interest for $196 million. So it's kind of a hot neighborhood right now. That structure then continues westward to the Borden discovery that I mentioned earlier. So we're 140 kilometers by highway south of Timmins. We're within driving distance of 4 mills. Goldcorp has a mill in Timmins. Lakeshore, which is now Tahoe, has a mill in Timmins. Kirkland Lake Gold has a mill in Kirkland Lake. And Alamos, who took over Orico, has a mill in Matachewan. That's the closest mill to us. And, of course, the fifth major is IM Gold, 12 miles to our west, developing this very large, I think it's a 4 to 8 million ounce deposit that Sumitomo's just invested in.
Bob, what can you tell our new listeners about Rainy Mountain Royalty?
The history of it, it was a company called East West that merged with the Capital Pool called Rainy Mountain, and the Capital Pool consisted of Bob Buchan, the chairman of Kinross, Chan Buckland, who had Boulder Capital, and that merged now to become Haywood, Hank Chuck, his geologist friend, and Ed Yukowski. So we merged that company a number of years ago to work on other properties in Ontario. It was a very tight share structure when we refinanced last fall of only 14 million shares. We raised over $3 million, and we have a substantial cash position still in the bank, and are proceeding with the Brunswick property as our main flagship gold property. We have a second gold property in the Thunder Bay area, west of Thunder Bay, in a district called Shabandawan. And adjacent to us, West Dome Gold Mines has a $5 million drill program drilling off a 3 million ounce deposit on a structure that continues into our Powell property that we own 100% of. So we intend to do a little bit of work on Powell as we're proceeding with Brunswick, but the main focus is the Brunswick project.
Bob, what platforms is Rainy Mountain traded on?
We trade on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol RMO, and we also trade in Frankfurt on a symbol called E for Echo, K for King, 7, N as in Nancy, dash, F as in Fred, S as in Fred.
And how can people contact your company?
The number here in Vancouver is area code 604-922-2030, and I think it's extension 1 for investor relations. Clive will answer the phone here. I am in an office in Thunder Bay, so I'm close to all our projects, and I can drive to them, of course, and I don't have to fly there. I have a cell number, which is area code 289-952-3695, and an office, which has a recorder on it. It's area code 807-623-3824.
Thanks, Bob. Doug, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. That was a pretty good summary of Mr. Middleton and let you know why we're so excited about the property.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the update.
Thanks very much for having us, Jim.
My guests have been Doug Mason, CEO and President of Rainy Mountain Royalty, and his Vice President of Operations, Bob Middleton. I'm Jim Goddard. We were speaking on July 17th.
Comments made on Company Showcase are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at HowStreet.com. Company Showcase is a production of How Street Media Incorporated. Welcome to Company Showcase, an advertising feature on HowStreet.com.
I'm Jim Goddard. My guest is Dale McClanaghan. He's the CEO of Lotus Ventures. Welcome back to the show, Dale.
Hello.
I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about Lotus Ventures and your latest venture.
Well, we're an applicant for a medical marijuana license. We've got building permits and financing arranged for our facility in Armstrong, British Columbia.
And what exactly do you plan to do?
Well, we're a startup. We'll have a production facility of approximately 22,000 square feet. And what we're particularly pleased with is the financing arrangement we have with Cannabis Wheaton, new to the market, but have established quite a big presence in the financing and streaming financing of companies like ours.
What kind of a deal do you have? I understand the financing's kind of unique.
Yeah, it's quite commonplace in the minerals business, whereby companies like Cannabis Wheaton, Silver Wheaton, invest in facilities and obtain a stream of commodity, whether it's copper or silver, in this case cannabis, over a specified term, and they get that at a price close to wholesale or a discount. So the producer, like us, helps get capital financing, in our case about $5 million for phase one and another $7 million for phase two when we get to that. And Cannabis Wheaton provides us with additional expertise and marketing, and they get a flow of commodity.
Is this a private placement?
No, actually, that arrangement is already in place as of January of this year, but we are doing a conventional private placement for equity of $2 million. That's fully subscribed now, but it's good news for our shareholders that we've got the resources to proceed to construction on our facility now.
And what kind of a construction schedule do you have?
We'll be starting sometime in the next few weeks, getting fully mobilized, and it's about a 9-month construction and inspection cycle to get fully commissioned.
Is this an exciting new area in Canadian business?
It is really. It's unusual for something of this scale to come on stream all at once, and obviously driven by first the judiciary, and then more recently the federal government that's looking to legalize recreational cannabis for July 1st of next year. Accordingly, we're seeing a lot of capital market participants, and in the case of Cannabis Wheaton, a considerable amount of innovation to fund much needed capacity.
Where can people find out more information about Lotus Ventures?
Well, we trade on the Canadian Stock Exchange on the symbol J, and we also have a website, lotusventures.ca, and they could also give me a call directly.
And that number?
604-644-9844.
Dale, thanks a lot for the update.
Great. Thank you, Jim.
We've been speaking with Dale McClanaghan. He's the CEO of Lotus Ventures. We were speaking on July 20th. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Company Showcase are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at HowStreet.com. Company Showcase is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.